So this week we've got 3 personal talks, and they're usually my favourite weeks actually. It's great to hear about people's personal experience of practicing the Dharma. And we've got 3 people who are going to talk on their experience of Shraddha. So if you were here a couple of weeks ago, the week before the Mitra ceremonies, you'll remember that I talked quite a lot about Shraddha and how it's one of those words that's best not translated actually, because it often gets translated as faith, which isn't really what it's about, because faith can sound a bit like it's about trying to believe something that's actually quite impossible, you know, that doesn't really make sense. Whereas Shraddha is the opposite really. Shraddha is about what your heart goes towards. It actually literally means what you set your heart upon. Okay, so this word Shraddha is linked to words in Latin like cardio. It comes from, those 2 words are very linked to each other. So it's about where you put your heart. And the 3 people who are going to talk about it today are going to talk about it in 3 different aspects. So it's traditionally divided into 3 different aspects, which are often very linked actually. But we're going to look at them in terms of what's called confident Shraddha, which is very much a kind of, you could say it's intellectual, but it's about where we know that something's true. Okay? And Dayapurna is going to come and talk about that in a little while, so I won't say more than that. We're also going to talk about what's called lucid Shraddha. And lucid Shraddha is the emotional aspect of Shraddha. And it's called lucid because what happens is if we are in that state, that emotional and mental state of feeling lucid Shraddha, our mind becomes very clear. Yes, our mind becomes clear, lucid, full of light. And Dave's going to talk about that in a little while. And then we're going to finish with longing faith, which you could say is volitional faith. So in a way, you could say that these different ways of dividing up faith, they're about the head, the heart, and the gut. Okay? So they're all parts of us that get us going. So I just want to say a little bit about people 2 of the people who are giving the talks, because for Dave, it's the first time he's given a Sangha talk, which is fantastic. And for Maitridasa, he's written his talk in a tent in the rain over the last couple of days. So, at the International Sangha Retreat. So I'm really looking forward to hearing what they've got to say. Just ask Dayapurna if you'll come up and
So I'm going to be talking about confident faith. And I was really pleased Satyajoti said that about faith, because I never thought about myself as a faith person. I never really did, because to me it had all those connotations of being asked to believe something blindly from a long while ago when I was a child, went to Sunday school and things. And I could never really, well, I could get on with it as a child, but as an adult, I never could. And so when I heard Shraddha is faith, it never really did anything much for me. And what I did, actually, I did like the idea of confidence. And what I've got is 3 examples of different instances in my life as a Buddhist before I got ordained that have to do with confident faith. And it's nice because there's one for each jewel. There's the Sangha jewel, there's the Dharma jewel, and then there's the Buddha jewel. So one short example for each of those. And all that time I knew that Shraddha didn't mean blind faith because I'd been told that, but I still kind of drifted, that's what Shraddha meant. It meant sort of blind faith and I wasn't interested. But later on it all began to come together and I could see what it was all about. But what I did know, right from the beginning, from my own experience, was that the Buddha, the Dharma and the Sangha made absolute sense to me. And so I always did have a kind of faith, or certainly a confidence as I saw it then, in the 3 jewels. So the first example is over there, that fantastic Sangha board. It wasn't as big as that at the time I'm talking about. I'm going back 7 years. And it was down in the red shrine room downstairs. There weren't as many of us on it. And I was in there. I went in on my own because my mother had just died. And I wanted to sit with the Buddha. And I was pretty upset And I happened to look over to the left on the wall where that picture is of the Buddha's life. And next to it was our Sangha board with all those photos. And it was very close to me in that room. It was just a yard or two away. And I remember looking at all those faces and they were all smiling at me. And I didn't feel alone anymore. And I was looking at different people on there, different friends of mine. And I just felt, I'm not alone, I'm all right. I've got good friends here. And it gave me a kind of confidence in the Sangha. It was really beautiful. So it's funny, this sort of head thing. I mean, I knew that in my head, but I also, of course, felt it in my heart. And I think that's important to say, is that confident faith isn't just a kind of knowing up here. I suppose it's chitta, really. It's that combination of mind and heart. So that was the first example. And before I go on to the next one, I just want to quote to you a really helpful little thing that was said to me by Shraddha, who is now 91 and just leaving Taraloka. She was one of the founder members of Taraloka in 1985. And a few years ago I was driving her home and we were just talking, and I said that I got a bit nervous if I had to talk about the Dharma. I was okay talking to my students at university, that was fine, but talk about the Dharma and I felt a bit nervous. And she said, why? And I thought about it, and I said, it's because the Dharma is so important and I want it to be right. And she said, it will be enough. And I just want to just say that before I go on to my second example, because that came back to me at this rather awkward time. So the time was, I can't remember, about 3-4 years ago, and we were changing mitra conveners. Vajratara was leaving Sheffield, and Moksha Leela was stepping down, and they were handing over to Satyajyoti and Shantasiddhi. So women's mitra conveners, I suppose they look after the mitras and make sure that everything goes fine, and that, well, they're there to pick up the pieces and look after people, something like that. And Punyamala had asked me if I would make a shrine in the Red Shrine Room for this special ceremony that we were going to have. And I said, yes, I'd love to do it, thinking I'll get somebody to help me, because I wasn't very confident about doing it on my own. And I often had somebody that we made shrines together. Alex, you may well know, who made shrines here, and the two of us used to do a lot of shrines together. But Alex was working on Thursday and she couldn't do it. And I asked other people and they were all working and couldn't do it. So I was stuck. I had to do it on the Thursday because this was for the Thursday evening and nobody could help. And I remember on the Tuesday sitting fairly well back in this room, listening to Vajratara giving a talk, and I can't remember what the talk's about, but I wasn't really paying attention. I was thinking about making that shrine that I really didn't want to make on my own, wondering how am I going to do it? I've got nobody to help me. I can't do it on my own. And suddenly I got this feeling, and what am I doing? You know, this is ego. I presumably want some praise for my shrine. I don't want to be blamed. So that worldly wind of praise and gain, praise and blame was going on somewhere. And I thought very clearly, this is not about me, it's about something much bigger than me. I've got to get myself out of it. I've got to get myself out of the way and give myself to what I've been asked to do. And I guess that Vajratara must have been talking about something like this. I don't know, but I think she might have been. And I suddenly got this feeling, a wonderful feeling about the Dharma. It kind of like flowed through me, thinking the Dharma is so important. I really want to do my very best for the Dharma. And again, this is not about me, this is about making a shrine for those 4 people, the 2 people who are stepping down, the 2 people who are taking their place, all the other people in that shrine room who are going to the ceremony, and for the Buddha Dharma, because that is really important. And I also thought about Ashuri's words, it it'll be enough. And I thought, it doesn't have to be anything wonderful. I will just do what I can. I will make a shrine. It'll be fine. And it was a lovely example of kind of getting myself out of the way and those feelings that I couldn't do it. And feeling, yes, I can. This is for my Sangha, this is for the Dharma, and I can do it. And yeah, I just got, that was a lovely time, because that feeling that there was something that was much more important than my own feelings was very special, and that stayed with me and came back to me a lot of times. That, yeah, of course, you know, how I feel does matter, but sometimes other things are more important, and I've learned to get myself out of the way a little bit for that. And I also thought then, yeah, I've asked for ordination, one day I will be ordained, and the word dharmachara or dharmacharini means a vehicle for the Dharma. The word, the bit in the middle, C-H-A-R, to me that sounds like chariot, you know, a chariot for the Dharma. I mean, that's really special. So the Dharma, you're serving the Dharma. And I thought about that. And that gave me a kind of confidence that, yes, I could serve the Dharma. And I could also probably give Dharma talks and not worry about it. So that was the second example of learning confidence, really. I still didn't call it Shraddha. And the third example is about the Buddha jewel. And this is where I'm going to bring in my lovely friend Susan there. We were both on, I've asked her and it's fine. We were at Tirupaloka on a retreat. It was an ethics retreat. And we'd both been for a walk with Kalyana Shri. And as I finished my walk with Kalyana Shri, we went separately, I finished my walk and Kalyana Shri said to me, trust your own experience. And I saw Susan a little bit later and she'd been on a walk with Kalyana Shri, and Kalyana Shri had said to Susan, touch the earth. And we just wondered what this meant. And a little bit later I was thinking about it. I thought, it's the same thing. Because when the Buddha touches the earth, we know the story about Mara and so on, but I think if you internalise that, it's the Buddha struggling with any last doubts he had. And so to me, that earth-touching mudra says, trust your own experience. And that's been very precious since then. Trusting myself, knowing that I can, and just having confidence. And that would also include, in my case, not worrying what other people think all the time. So it was a very valuable lesson, that one. And yeah, so she was saying in a way, trust yourself, be yourself, shine, do what you can, and that was great. Yes, that mudra, that earth-touching mudra has become a really important, essential part of my whole practice since then. So those are three examples that gave me real confidence in the Sangha, the Dharma and the Buddha, and myself in those contexts. So the Shraddha bit came in a little bit later because I went to Adhisthana. It's my very first regional order weekend when I'd been ordained. We went to Adhisthana in October, and it was about Shraddha. The whole weekend was about Shraddha. And I was in a group with a lovely order member from Manchester called Dayapurna, who some of you may know. And she was kind of leading our group, really, because she's very experienced and she's a preceptor. And I said to her and the group that I didn't really think of myself as a faith person. I was more interested in confidence. And she looked at me and she said, they're exactly the same thing. They come from the same word. And I thought, of course they do. They both come from Latin, fidere, so confidence, and the word faith goes back through French, I guess, back to Latin. And they are the same word, they mean the same thing. So all the time, that confidence that I had been learning to trust and to let grow had actually been Shraddha. And then I talked about it with Victoria, didn't I? And she said, yes, of course it's the same word. And I know that through Spanish. It's exactly the same word, isn't it, in Spanish? And so that was lovely to find that it had all along really been Shraddha. It's just that the connotations that I brought to Shraddha had been false. And I got the wrong end of the stick, really, when it came down to it. So there we are. That was my experience of learning to develop Shraddha. And it's been such a wonderful help to me throughout my life as a Buddhist so far. So that's it, I think.
Yeah, so I'm going to be talking about this lucid aspect of Shraddha. And also encompassing that, as Satyajoti said, is about this emotional response. I'm going to start with a quote from Sangha Night. So Sangha Night has called it a lifting of the heart. So in the same way that compassion is what happens when metta encounters suffering, and this emotional aspect of Shraddha begins when metta encounters something higher than ourselves as we currently are. So there's a lifting of the heart, which can have an element not only of love and admiration, but also of delight, devotion, wonder and awe. So this is talking about the emotional and the heart aspect of Shraddha, and it's an emotional response to ideas and values. So it's a heart response to spiritual values, which gives us a deep sense of what really matters to us. And I like to think of it as a volume control on the spiritual life. So the stronger your emotional connection, the louder your spiritual life will be, the more likely you're able to act on it. And yeah, I'm going to talk about 3 different manifestations of this emotional response. So the first one is an emotional response to positive values, or what has ultimate value. So this can be described as the love of truth, so this pull towards something that's transcendental, that you can't really put into words. And I've experienced this when listening to really good Dharma talks or having really fruitful discussions about the Dharma with spiritual friends. And it brings me a real sense of joy, and it's a joy not from just the words that we've been discussing, but these words grow out of this ultimate truth that they're ultimately pointing towards. And it's a really, really pleasurable experience. And Sangha has talked about this idea of what's ultimate in us resonating with what's ultimate in the universe. So, and I also think this love for what's meaningful, it's what makes living in samsara unsatisfactory. So I find that at the beginning I think that it might be really good to just watch film after film on Netflix, or just watch Game of Thrones after Game of Thrones and try and watch the whole series in a week. But I can only manage about 1 or 2 hours of that before something starts pulling on me. And this is I think the pull towards this ultimate truth. So it's not, I realise I'm not getting anywhere just burying myself in distractions. So it's this pull towards this ultimate value and ultimate truth that makes things satisfactory, but also makes me have the drive to change and find something that is satisfactory. And I've heard lots of people say, and I've said myself, that they couldn't stop being a Buddhist even if they tried. And I think this is something to do with this response to this ultimate value. So you can stop acting on this ultimate value, this pull, but once you've experienced it, you can't really pretend that it's not there. So you can try and bury it in distractions, but ultimately you're always going to feel this pull towards this ultimate value, this transcendental principle. And an experience for me is coming on the introductory course. So before I came on the introductory course, I was in university, and things were absolutely fine within my life. I was doing well at university, I had lots of friends, things were fine, but there was a real deep unsatisfactoriness, a real deep longing. I think I was quite unhappy, even though I seemed to have everything sorted out. And then when I first came to the introductory course, The only way I can describe it was a bit like being pulled out of deep water and taking a breath of fresh air. So a real feeling of joy and elation came over me, just a real sense of relief as well, because I was hearing this ultimate truth. Something was resonating within me that was being said about this ultimate truth. And the second thing I want to talk about is the emotional response of love and admiration for people who are more spiritually advanced than us. And I think a really good book that I read that encapsulates this is A Celebration of Dada Rinpoche. So Dada Rinpoche was one of Sangha teachers, and he regarded him as a bodhisattva. So his whole life was geared towards gaining enlightenment for the sake of all beings. And he ran a Tibetan school in Kalimpong. And he was such an important teacher to Sangha that many of his disciples would go and visit Dada Rinpoche. And this book, called The Celebration of Dada Rinpoche, is made up of people's personal experiences of going to meet him. And it's really, really good to read, because a lot of people, when they go and see him, they're just completely blown away by his compassion. So they've travelled thousands of miles to see this person, and as soon as they see him, they just forget all the questions that they had to ask him. They're just completely awestruck. And a few people just spontaneously start crying. So when asked about this, when people asked Dada Rinpoche about this, he just responded that some people cry when they are happy. So I think this is a really good example of this emotional response for someone who's the embodiment of this ultimate value, and the embodiment of what is good, and the embodiment of a higher self that we can become. And this is one of Sangha main important teachings about vertical friendship, or Kalyana Mitrata, spiritual friendship. So having friendship with those who are further along the path than us. So getting to know all the members can awaken this this emotional response of Shraddha, and this love for these spiritual qualities that we ourselves want to embody. And we come into contact with them when we get to know all the members better. And it's quite difficult to connect with this lofty idea of enlightenment. I find it quite hard to connect to this idea of enlightenment. But when I come into contact with all the members and I get to know all the members and more spiritually advanced beings better, it really makes it more real and easier to see. And I can feel this emotional response of love and joy from that. And the third thing I want to talk about is the emotional response that extends to not just to advanced practitioners, but to seeing the positive qualities in everyone. So again, Sangha has talked about relating to all people in terms of their potential. So having this love and admiration on account of the potentiality of others and to ourselves, no matter what state the living being is in. So people, animals, this encompasses all sentient life. And I think this is a really good practical expression of what I sometimes find a lofty and often misused idea of no self. So this idea of not getting stuck in my own likes or dislikes of someone, whether I approve or disapprove them, or approve about what they're doing or not doing, but to interact to others always in relation to their ultimate potential. It opens the door for universal loving kindness to all beings. Not in a naive way to love everyone because everyone acts well, because everyone is acting good. But it's rooted in the idea that no one is fixed, that all have the potential to change, and therefore all have the potential for enlightenment. And I found this, I found this a lot harder to do with someone that you know rather than someone that you don't know very well. Because it's so easy to get to know someone and then form fixed ideas about what people are like. So you get to know someone and you kind of box them in and say this person's like this. And it's really hard to break out of that and really relate to someone's potential. So in a way, I've tried to make it a practice to see people that I know well like for the first time every time I see them. So to break out of this, this boxing people in and making people solid and not really relating to them in terms of their potential. Yeah, so emotional faith, it can also be described as our response to spiritual beauty. So beauty of higher values, beauty of character in people or beings. And it's strongly related to the aesthetic sense by which we perceive beauty in art, music and nature. So you could say that the response to spiritual beauty and the response to natural beauty are different aspects of the same faculty. So both faculties have elements that are beyond the logical. So you can't really explain why you love a painting or you find a bit of scenery really moving, or you really like a bit of music. But in the same way, you can't really explain why you're drawn towards the truth, or why only the truth will do, or that you can't really explain why metta is beautiful and hatred is ugly. And both of these faculties are also stronger when you're in positive states. So the example, the faculty of appreciating beauty in nature is a lot stronger when you're in a positive state than when you're in a negative state. I know from my own personal experience, I was climbing a mountain in Norway with a friend, and on the way up I was just blown away by how beautiful the scenery was, how clear the air was, how far I could see. I just felt this real sense of pleasure from it. And then on the way down we got lost. And then all of a sudden the beauty vanished as I felt really stressed and uncomfortable, as I thought I was never going to get back. And in the same way, the same can be said for Shraddha. So when I'm in a good state, I experience this love for something higher really easily compared to when I'm in a bad state. And the third thing, both faculties can be developed by practice. So if you're not used to looking at paintings or being out in nature, you can find it difficult to appreciate the beauty. And I know that occasionally I catch some cookery programmes like the Great British Bake Off that I call. And I was always amazed that when the finalists presented their cakes to the judges and the judges took a taste of what they could actually taste. So they were talking about like the crispiness of the bake and the quality of the bake and all the different flavours that they could taste, and like the subtlety of the lemon. And I know that when I eat cake, that's all I taste. I just taste cake, I can't taste anything else. So, and this is an example of like my taste sense aren't refined enough to experience that level of flavour. And in the same way, it's the same with Shraddha. So the more we practice, the more skilled we get at perceiving spiritual beauty, and the more accurate we get at detecting spiritual truth. So as a consequence of this emotional response, this positive emotional response to what's spiritually beautiful, it results in a clarity of mind. So this emotional aspect of Shraddha can usually be translated as lucid faith. And this can literally mean something like faith that gives a lucid, serene, bright, happy mind. Faith is said to have this nature of purifying the mind. So it's likened to a mythical water purifying gem, which instantly makes muddy water clear and sparkling. Negative states cannot stay within this mind, because when we love and admire spiritual ideals with mental clarity, we're no longer plagued by doubt, anxiety, and anxiety that comes from uncertainty. So our mind becomes serene and happy and bright. And a great image for me that demonstrates this is the image of the Bodhisattva play, written by Shantideva in his book, the Bodhicharyavatara. So Shantideva was a famous 6th century Indian monk. And he wrote about the Bodhisattva, so one whose every aspect of one's life is focused towards attainment of enlightenment for all beings. And he said that once this Bodhisattva completes one task, he immediately and joyfully jumps up and dives straight into the next task. And he described this like an elephant at play. So playing in a lotus pond, jumping in a really cool lotus pond, and then once he's finished playing in one lotus pond, jumping out and immediately jumping in the next. And I think this is a really good image for me for removing the idea that the more straight-faced and serious about Buddhism you are, the better the Buddhist you are. And in Christianity it's talked about as having a Sabbath face, so the more serious and the more miserable you are, the more pious and devout you are. And lucid faith has these connotations of giving rise to a clear mind that is light and joyous and flexible. So this idea of playfulness and the bodhisattva at play is a really attractive ideal for me. I really, just thinking about playing like the great game of enlightenment from samsara into nirvana, it really releases a lot of energy for me. And in connection with this, I reminded myself of a story I heard about Maitridasa. So Maitridasa lives and works here, and he's busy with lots of different responsibilities. And on one occasion, he was going to meet someone, and Tandil asked him whether it was business or pleasure that he was going to meet this person. And Maitridasa replied, both. So I think this encapsulates really well this wrong notion that you have to give up everything you love, you have to grit your teeth, and then you have to go and live in a cave to be a good Buddhist. Because this lucid faith, this serene, bright and happy mind, it comes of this great joy of being on the path. So there is a near enemy of lucid faith. Sangha has pointed it out that it can easily be confused with mere pleasure. We can have this aspect strongly in our experience. We can really feel this joyous emotional response, this lucid faith. And it can be like falling in love with the ideal, but we can't expect to have this lifting of the heart all the time. So we often have to live in the memory of this. And if this is difficult to do so, then this isn't really, it's not really Shraddha what we're experiencing. So a cheap counterfeit version of this faith is having faith in something simply because it feels good. That it panders to our wishful thinking, and it promises quick results with no effort. So I think we're all drawn to that, and I was particularly drawn to that. So I remember I wanted to be more self-confident. And when I first came to the Buddhist Centre, I didn't feel I was very self-confident. So I thought, I'll go and ask a monk of Angsa, because he's really spiritually experienced. So I'll go and ask him, and he'll tell me how to be more self-confident. And I went and asked him, and the answer I got, he said, go and do the Metta Bhavana every day for 6 months. And although this is a really good answer, this wasn't what I was looking for. I was looking for a really quick thing that I could do just in an afternoon and just bang it out. So yeah, this idea of wanting these quick results and just being drawn to something just because it's pleasurable, this can be this near enemy of lucid faith. So in conclusion, lucid faith is an emotional response to deeper values, but it's more than just a warm, pleasurable feeling. It creates a clarity of mind. And the acid test of this lucid faith is, can you put it into action? Are your lives guided by it? Because a natural expression of the emotional response of lucid faith is that of action.
That's the first bit of advice you ever gave me as well. I first saw Dave on an introductory course here in 2011, and I couldn't have imagined you doing that. So the volume on my Shraddha has increased by much unusual. The future's rosy. And I'm off. So normally when I give a talk, I type it out, and I know how many pages of A4 paper a font 14 makes a 15-minute talk. I don't know about handwritten notes on the Mudcaked International Sangha Retreat program, but we'll see. Okay, so we've heard about confident Shraddha, which is the response of our intellectual faculties. So we come across something or someone of great value, of truth, of beauty, something beyond our ordinary, limited, sort of grabby, cynical minds. And we just know it to be of value. We know that to be true. We recognise it as something of real worth, So it's the response is, I know this to be true. And we've heard about lucid Shraddha, which is more our emotional response. So again, you come across something or someone of value, truth and beauty, and our hearts lift and expand. So the response here is more, I love this. I love this because I know it's true. So the two are very linked. So now I'm going to talk about longing Shraddha, and Dave gave me a perfect link. So longing Shraddha is about action. It's about our volitional response. It's about what we do with that. So if we know something to be true with our head, and we love it, we really love it with our heart and mind, then an active response is demanded actually. It's almost like we're compelled to act on it. So we're both fascinated and challenged. We simply have to respond somehow. We have to find a way to respond, to dedicate ourselves to it, to move closer to it, to align ourselves with it, to serve it, to build our lives around it, and to make sacrifices for it sometimes. So out of this deep, intuitive knowing and this deep loving emerges action, decisiveness, boldness, commitment. Not only do I know this and love this, I will act on this. I will allow my life to be guided by this. I'll allow myself to be drawn towards this. So then our response becomes more unified, it becomes more whole. And we experience a real desire, desire and longing to move towards spiritual qualities, to move towards what is beautiful, what is true. We see these qualities in others and in ideals, but we also sense them in ourselves. So there's a recognition. And we have a longing to grow, we have a longing to evolve, to fulfill our potential, to bear fruit, to close the gap between the ideals and ourselves. Ourselves as we are now, and ourselves as we might be. So this is longing Shraddha, and Sangha describes longing Shraddha as a profound desire to attain and realise what is good, and the confidence in our ability to do that. So that links very much with Dayapurna's talk. So it's not just that we're admiring a distant ideal that we don't believe that little old me could actually move closer to. Actually, passivity is an enemy of Shraddha. So we are galvanised to respond, to move, to act, to grow. But also, we don't reduce the ideal so close to where we are now that it becomes just another thing that we can own somehow. Something actually not really worth longing for at all. So we have this sort of tension between the ideal that's drawing us towards it and a confidence that we can attain that. The ideal of enlightenment is sublime and it's mysterious. It's a sublime mystery, and the appropriate response to that is devotion, reverence, awe, and wonder. But then we also have this sense of connection, resonance from within us, and that evokes a response of action, actually, of desire to practice, desire to realise, of boldness and determination. A willingness to take risks, to let go, to burn our bridges. It can feel like a positive future, a new me, a new you. It's somehow trying to emerge, and that we just have to find a way to let that happen, to let it emerge. And of course, very often we resist doing that because the process of our future selves emerging is messy, it's unpredictable. We can't actually control it. It can be quite scary. So this longing to give expression to what we perceive to be true can apply to all aspects of life. In a sense, it's not a specifically Buddhist thing. It could apply to the creation of a poem, to a piece of work or a project we're involved in, to the building of a friendship, the building of a Sangha, and the emergence of a Buddha, the emergence of an enlightened being. So actually it applies to the creation of anything of real value and real worth. Okay, so September 1990. This is a long time before I came into contact with Buddhism. So I was in Calcutta, and I just finished 3 months working with the organisation set up by Mother Teresa, the Missionaries of Charity, and I'd worked in a hospice where volunteers looked after dying, destitute people. And from that experience, that experience gave me a real clarity, actually. It gave me a new perspective on life. I saw things that I'd never seen before. I saw things in a new way. And that head response meant that I didn't want to continue the sort of life that I was leading. So I was on a bit of a career elevator. I was at university. And it also really affected me emotionally, of course. I was deeply moved by the harsh realities that I was seeing. A lot of the time I'd work during the day and I'd go home and I'd just burst into tears. It was a very sort of affecting experience. But also the beauty of seeing people devote their lives to do something worthwhile, to do something about it. So I had both a head response and a heart response. And it was as if those two responses joined forces, unified, and just jolted me out of the trajectory of my life. Coming away from that experience, I just knew I had to act, and I knew I had to act differently. With as much of myself as I could possibly gather together at that time, I needed to act more in line with this new perspective that I had. So, I came back to this country, and I didn't pursue a career in science, which was the way I was heading, and got involved in youth work projects in Glasgow, and ended up going back to India and working with children in India. Okay, so I just say that to sort of illustrate how these sort of come together, a head response and a heart response unified in action. Jump 15 years. So, a lot of that time I was working according to my ideals, and it was very satisfactory work, and I had a lot of energy flowing. But slowly, I lost touch with that. Just incrementally, I gradually lost touch with that desire to act according to those ideals. And in 2004, I had a really awful year, actually. Just a lot of things in my life went wrong, and I experienced a lot of distress. And in 2005, so again, I'm in India, and I'm just wandering aimlessly in a bit of a daze around India. And I ended up in a place called Dayapurna, in the Himalayan foothills. I didn't go there seeking Buddhism. I went there seeking forested valleys and monkeys. That's what it said in the guidebook. But quickly I realised it was a Buddhist place. That's where the Dalai Lama lives. And there's lots of bookshops. So I went into a bookshop and said, "Can I have a book on Buddhism?" And this guy, this Indian book owner, he just looked at me. He didn't look at the books. He just turned and he pulled out this book, which was called "When Life Falls Apart." It was a great read, and I had a real head response to reading that book, a real intellectual response. I got really, really excited just reading again and again. And I was taking notes, and I just realised that actually I wasn't taking notes, I was just copying out the whole book. It's like anything that resonated with me, anything that I sort of knew to be true, I just wrote it down, and it was practically everything. So I had this very exciting intellectual response. A response of, I've always known this to be true. But also, it's way beyond where I am at the moment, actually. And in that situation, I also had an emotional response, a lucid Shraddha response. A sense that what I'm reading, the people that I'm with, and also the beautiful surroundings had an effect. This somehow just expresses the ideals that I've always loved, actually. It reminded me of what I've always loved. It felt like being reunited with a separated lover. It really felt like that. Plus mountains. And so again, I had both a head response and a heart response, and these responses joined forces and compelled me into action. But this time the action looked very different. This time the action wasn't about starting a social project or doing worthy work. This time it was about coming to the Buddhist Centre and learning to meditate. I knew that if I learned to meditate, it would make a difference to my life. So I just want to make the point from that people's responses to the Dharma, people's responses of Shraddha can look very different at different times. They can look different at different times of our lives, but different people have different types of responses. And it's safest to assume that we really don't know what's going on for other people. And it's always safest just to examine ourselves and our own motivations, not to get into sort of trying to work out why other people are responding the way that they are. Sometimes it can be confusing to see people respond in different ways to us, but best just to examine ourselves. Okay, jump forward again. So it's 2008. I've just asked for ordination, I think. Sometime about the time I've asked for ordination. And I was on this retreat in Norfolk, and the topic of the retreat was Shraddha. And I went to an order member called Padmavajra, who ended up ordaining me. And I just said to him, I'm not feeling any connection with it. I don't feel like I've got any Shraddha. There's no sort of heart response to what was going on at the retreat. I just must have been feeling not very inspired at the time. And so I don't feel like I've got much Shraddha. And he just said, you must be joking. It's like, he said, are you going every week to Maitridasa? Yeah. Do you work in a team-based right livelihood? Yeah. Do you live in a community? Yes. So he just asked me this question to draw out, actually, the important thing is what I'm doing. We can't always rely on, as Dave said, we can't always rely on feeling this sort of strong connection with three jewels. So Sangha says the test of Shraddha is whether one is able to act on it in the absence of any kind of pleasurable feeling. Test of Shraddha is whether we're able to act on it in the absence of any kind of pleasurable feeling. So we can't rely on a heart response always being there. And we're not always looking through lenses where everything seems to make perfect sense. So our actions are fueled by these head responses and heart responses. And what can happen is we have a sort of strong longing, a strong desire to act. And a sort of momentum is created, which just keeps us going. For a while. But at some time, it can feel like they're running out. So jump forward again. Vajraloka, this was last year, so this is after I'm ordained. So this story is to prove that order members haven't got it sussed yet. So only 1 year ago. And so I was doing some reading, and I was reading about the archetypal Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. And there's something that I was reading which, it said, assume that archetypal Buddhas and Bodhisattvas are actual real beings who exist. And I sort of, my confident faith, Shraddha, just sort of ground to a halt at that. And the reason was it really sort of grated against my Christian conditioning, because it was like, well, it was God. And I just sort of couldn't get past it. So I hit intellectual doubt. And on that retreat, I also hit emotional doubt. So we're in the shrine room one evening, ready to do a puja. And lots of percussion instruments came out. And people started banging their percussion instruments during the puja. And that, for me, also reminds me of my Christian conditioning, because that's what evangelical Christians do. So I had this combination of intellectual doubt, emotional doubt, confident Shraddha, whoops, grind to a halt, lucid Shraddha, I sort of hit a brick wall. I don't know this to be true. I know this to be a group of people banging percussion instruments. I don't love this. I feel slightly freaked out by this. I long to run away and stop being a Buddhist immediately. I'm sure I've made a terrible mistake. It wasn't just like, I don't want to be an order member. It's like, no, actually, backpedal, don't want to be a Buddhist at all. If this is what Buddhism is, lots and lots of doubt. So, yeah, my head response and my heart response seemed to run out of steam. And I felt paralysed, actually. I just spent a couple of days in bed. But actually, I did act. And the way that I acted in that situation was not running away. I just stayed with the doubts and sort of tried to go deeper into them. Reflected on my journey so far. And tried to reconnect with my original longing, my original connection with, the original spark up in Dharamsala in the Himalayan foothills. What had made me act in the first place? What depths in me responded to these ideals? Why am I doing this? What was my life like without it? Is there really any going back now? What sort of life do I actually want to lead? What sort of person do I desire to become? So Shraddha and doubt actually go hand in hand. We sometimes see them as polar opposites. Shraddha, a sense of connection, a desire to act, and doubt is sort of what gets in the way of that. But actually they go hand in hand. So Shraddha isn't certainty. Shraddha is not certainty. It's a response to a truth and a beauty which is profoundly mysterious. And, we can't actually pin it down all the time. So as our Shraddha deepens, as our confidence deepens, as our heart response deepens, as our longings deepen, so our doubts also deepen. We sort of encounter deeper doubts very often. Deeper doubts which kick in and force us to look deeper into life, to find a deeper confidence, to find a deeper lucidity and a deeper longing. So this is a very typical experience on retreats that people have. When all the usual distractions that stop us connecting with our depths are removed, when there's nowhere to hide, nowhere to run, then we very often sort of hit a level of sort of a bedrock of deeper doubt which we have to sort of pick up, toe through. So Shraddha is the response of as much of ourselves as we can possibly muster at any given time to spiritual truth, value, beauty and qualities. It's a head response, it's a heart response, and ultimately it's a longing for and a movement towards truth and value and beauty. So it can be described as a positive, skillful desire. So desire often gets a bad press in Buddhism because it's very often desire is talked about in the same breath as neurotic craving, actually desiring, craving for things which don't actually work. But there is a positive, skillful desire to step out of the usual cramped, reactive ways that we live our lives, the unsatisfactory things that we seek pleasure from, and to act skillfully, guided by ethical precepts, to open up to a whole higher dimension of truth, to go for refuge. To go for refuge, it's an action. Sometimes Buddhism is accused of being all about escape and turning away from life. But actually to resign ourselves to a life of distracting ourselves by craving pleasures from things that don't work, that can never really offer us satisfaction, that's the real escapism. And Shraddha is the response of our whole being, or as much of us as possible, that moves us away from this, that moves us away from limited, reactive self-centeredness, and moves us in the direction of a deeper connection with the world, a deeper connection with others, a deeper connection with profound mysteries. That'll do.